every couple in love has its own vocabulary. And they establish a vocabulary over time. Eventually, the vocabulary of love between the soul and God is silence. My name is Father Michel Perry, and I'm a priest in Brooklyn, New York, and I've been a priest going on 46 years. I grew up in New York, and my roots. I'm 100% Ukrainian. Excuse me. All of my grandparents came from Ukraine, from Galicia in western Ukraine. They came here around 1910, and I'm not sure from where. I don't know the names of the towns. My mother's family moved to Pennsylvania, and my father's family stayed in New York. My father's family broke up early because there was a flu epidemic in New York, and my grandfather died in that flu epidemic when my father was very young. My grandmother was a housekeeper. She cleaned houses and kept her family going that way. She went to the Ukrainian church in Queens, in Astoria, Holy Spirit, no, Holy Cross Church in Astoria. My father never felt comfortable with his Ukrainian identity, in part because when he went to school, he didn't speak English, and we're talking about in the teens and 20s. The people who taught the school were very WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And if you didn't speak English, that was a mark against you. My father didn't speak English when he went to school, and so he was embarrassed. He eventually learned English and was a very smart man. But that stayed with him forever. And so when he was old enough, he joined the Navy, and to prove that he was an American, he left the Ukrainian world and went to church in the Latin Rite and identified with the Latin Rite for as much as he identified with any church. So that when I was born, I was baptized in a Latin church, even though by Catholic canon law, I should have been baptized in a Ukrainian Greek Catholic church. My mother's family moved to Pennsylvania. And in Pennsylvania, there was a big schism where a Father Toth, Alexis Toth, was a Ukrainian Greek Catholic priest. He went to the bishop there to present his credentials, and the bishop threw him out. The bishop didn't believe that he was a Catholic because the bishop was Irish and he knew nothing about Ukrainian Greek Catholics. And so he refused to accept this Catholic priest as a Catholic priest. And so Father Toth went and looking for a bishop was adopted by the Russian Orthodox Church. And so my mother was originally baptized Ukrainian Greek Catholic. The whole congregation became Russian Orthodox, and then eventually my mother became Catholic again, but through the Latin Rite Catholic Church. That's how I got to be Latin Rite Catholic priest. At the time of my ordination, a representative of my bishop came to my seminary and said, by law, you are actually a Ukrainian Greek Catholic. But I didn't know anything about that. It was not how I grew up. It was not what I knew. And so I was allowed to switch rites, provided that I would never switch back to the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. And I agreed to that. And so I'm a Latin Rite Catholic priest, but 100% Ukrainian. And had things been different politically, I'd probably be a Greek Catholic priest, but I'm not. When I was growing up, it was during the McCarthy era. And the McCarthy era in the United States was a very, very difficult time, certainly for my family. Because in those days, if you were Ukrainian, it meant that you were Russian. And if you were Russian, you were a communist, and if you were communist, you were bad. American people have a very narrow understanding of ethnicity and of politics in Eastern Europe, and as a result, that became a mindset. And so my father told me to tell people I was Polish, because Polish was okay, because the Poles fought against the Russians. But in fact, we're Ukrainian. Both my parents spoke Ukrainian as their first language. All of my grandparents spoke Ukrainian, certainly as their first language when they came to America. And then they spoke Ukrainian to their children. And my one grandfather I never knew, my father's father I never knew, but my grandmother on my father's side and my other grandparents, Ukrainian was the language that they spoke at home. So my Ukrainian identity was around me all the time, even though it was not specifically called Ukrainian. On the one side, it was called Russian, and on the other side, it was hidden, in a sense, by my grandmother, who went to her church, but we went to the Latin church. As I grew older, I became interested in the Byzantine liturgy, and through that came to understand better what my roots were. That it wasn't just the food that we ate on holidays, that there was something deeper than that. And in my mother's house, there were icons in every room. And there was also a picture of my Uncle John. My Uncle John was killed in the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium in World War II. And I just presumed that my Uncle John and Jesus and John the Baptist and the Virgin Mary, they were my family. I was Ukrainian. I grew up with icons. I grew up with that family sense. And so my religion surrounded me. My faith surrounded me, but not as a Western concept, but really that Eastern concept where we live in the presence of the sacred. And so my Ukrainian roots come at me from very different angles. They come at me from food, from tradition, not from language, 'cause I don't speak Ukrainian at all, but from a spirituality that's very profound. And also from that innate sense of belonging. Several years ago, I went with my sister, and we were in Kiev. And my sister, who has a very different appreciation of her Ukrainian roots, said to me as we were walking down the street, "Michael, I feel like we belong here." We do. We're Ukrainian. The only difference between me and people who live in Ukraine is that I live in America. But I'm Ukrainian. And I'm very proud of that. When my family moved to California, I was alone. My whole family moved away. And I lasted about 6 months without having Ukrainian food. My mother was gone. I had no place to go. So I went to Kurovitsky in Lower East Side. And by God's grace, that family adopted me. And they helped me not only to eat the food that I needed to eat to maintain my identity, but they welcomed me into their family. And so for Christmas and Easter every year, I would go and celebrate with them. And I remember the first time I went there. The first time I went there, I was welcomed by a member of their family who was very disabled and very disfigured. And he welcomed me at the top of the stairs. He gave me a kiss. His name was Roman. He died a few years later. And I went into the house, and there was a table set for 40 people. And I realized that this family, where everyone was speaking Ukrainian but me, that family was living the way I lived, where the children didn't sit at a special table. We were mixed in. And I learned that by affirmation, that the way I had grown up was, in fact, the way a Ukrainian family lives. Many years later, I went to Ukraine for the first time, and I went to the house of Father Raphael Stronsitsky, who's a Studite monk, and his mother welcomed me. And I had the most amazing experience, because besides the hospitality, which fed me more food than any one person should ever eat, okay, I went to her backyard, and she had chickens. And that backyard was exactly set up the way my grandmother's yard was. The vegetables were planted the same way. The chickens were in the same place. Everything was the same, because my grandmother had taken what she knew in Ukraine and brought it to Pennsylvania. And now I'm coming to Ukraine, and I'm seeing this exact same thing there. I went, when I was in Lviv, we went to the village where they have all the reconstructed houses. And I met Mr. Didula, and he showed me around. And I'm looking at things, and I'm looking at ways that people welcomed me. And I'm seeing in handshakes and in kisses and in just gestures of welcome the way I grew up. So that instead of reading about my roots in a book, I read about my roots in the faces and in the welcome I got from other people. in America, we grow up, everyone has a dual identity. So if you say to somebody, what are you? Obviously, we're all American, but everyone here is a hyphenated American. I'm Polish American, I'm Italian American, I'm German American, I'm Ukrainian American. And in this country, people are encouraged, or at least they were, to celebrate their roots, their ethnicity, to celebrate where they come from. There's a joke that on Thanksgiving, everybody eats turkey. So everybody goes and buys a turkey. But the Italian people put spaghetti in their turkey, and Chinese people put chow mein in their turkey, and German people put sauerkraut in their turkey, and we put kielbasa in our turkey. You know. But the turkey is what holds us together. America is what holds us together. And we are more than allowed, we're encouraged by the world that we live in to have that one identity that has two sides. And so we see it very much with the Jewish community in their defense of Israel. We see it in any ethnic community here in America, where they will be working to help the country of their origin. Sometimes that gets lost, depending on how many generations people have lived here. But for me, for example, I'm Ukrainian, and I will do anything that I can to help Ukraine establish the freedom, the independence, the democracy that Ukraine is trying to establish and fighting for. And I choose to do that through the university, through the Ukrainian Catholic University. I'm very blessed that that opportunity was provided to me, because there are other possibilities too that may have been more political or more cultural, but this for me was the ideal way.